At 6:20 a.m. on the 29th of January, 2026, under the biting cold skies of Taganrog, southern Russia, a small drone weighing roughly 2.3 kilograms was wobbling in midair. It was flying blind through a storm of anti-aircraft fire. A Pantsir S-1 system below was unleashing nearly 4,000 rounds per minute, turning the sky into a wall of tracers. The operator had exactly 12 seconds to guide this plastic and carbon fiber quadcopter through the narrow doorway of an aircraft hangar before the heavy steel doors slammed shut. Inside that hangar sat a Mi-28 Newton's attack helicopter, one of Russia's primary combat helicopters, valued at 16 to 18 million US dollars, designed for low-altitude fire support and ground target hunting. To truly understand how close this moment was, we need to rewind about 90 seconds. The target of the strike was the Beriev Aircraft Plant, located roughly 90 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. This facility handles repair, maintenance, and upgrades for multiple Russian military aircraft and helicopters. It is among the most heavily defended sites in the region. Long-range S-400 air defense systems, medium and short-range missile complexes, and multiple layers of electronic warfare protect the area. One of them is the R-330 Zhazhitel, a dedicated electronic warfare vehicle capable of jamming GPS, satellite communications, and drone control signals across tens of kilometers. On paper, this was an impenetrable fortress, but the entire defense network had a critical vulnerability. The hangar door control system was still using its factory default password, unchanged since the facility was commissioned. Intelligence services discovered the oversight, a small mistake with catastrophic implications. To exploit it, 20 drones were launched simultaneously. A total investment of roughly $12,000 in drones was sent against a Russian defense system worth hundreds of millions. So the question is, did Ukraine pull it off? And how would Russia respond? Before we continue, drop your opinion below. Type 9 if you support Ukraine, type 1 if you support Russia, and if you stand for peace, type 5. Now, let's move into the battle. At 6:28 a.m., 30 FPV drones lifted off from Ukraine's coastline. Immediately, they were hit by strong crosswinds of nearly 33 kilometers per hour, powerful enough to flip a drone weighing under 3 kilograms. The air temperature was around -5 degrees Celsius. Cold like that severely degrades lithium polymer batteries, reducing effective capacity by roughly 15%. Operators were forced to push the throttles constantly just to keep the drone stable. They dropped altitude to just 9 meters above the surface, skimming the Sea of Azov. At that height, the curvature of the Earth helped mask them from long-range S-400 radar systems, though they still risked detection by thermal cameras and coastal observation posts. From this point on, software became the decisive weapon. Instead of flying in rigid formations, the drones followed an algorithm inspired by biological swarm behavior, trained on 3 days of traffic camera data from Taganrog. They drifted with the wind. They avoided straight lines. They moved unpredictably. To Russian soldiers watching through thermal optics, the motion looked exactly like a flock of seabirds feeding, not a coordinated attack. The deception was nearly perfect. About 5 kilometers from shore, a real eagle mistook the trailing drone for an intruder. It dove at nearly 130 kilometers per hour. On the operator's grainy 480p video feed, talons suddenly filled the screen. Instinct kicked in. The operator yanked the control stick to the right. The drone rolled violently, experiencing forces close to 4G. The eagle missed by inches. The drone stabilized and rejoined the swarm. The group had crossed the border. But the hardest part was still ahead. At 6:32 a.m., with only 5 kilometers to the target, the S-400 system finally began to react. The 91 N6E early warning radar, designed to track high-altitude, high-speed threats like bombers and ballistic missiles, finally managed to filter out sea clutter. And it detected something abnormal. The system didn't see 20 individual drones. Instead, it interpreted the entire cluster as a single low-flying target, similar to a cruise missile. A long-range interceptor missile was launched. Within seconds, it accelerated to supersonic speed, far beyond the maneuvering capability of the tiny drones. Russia had just spent over $1 million on a missile to destroy targets worth only a few $100s each. But the missile was too fast. At that speed, it couldn't adjust its trajectory precisely enough to hit slow, small objects. It screamed past the drone formation by more than 100 meters. Still, the proximity fuse triggered. The warhead detonated. A shockwave expanded outward at the speed of sound, slamming directly into the swarm with brutal force. 3 drones were destroyed instantly, their carbon frames shattered like dry branches snapped in half. On the operator's screens, 3 video feeds abruptly turned to white static. The remaining 17 drones didn't panic. They switched instantly into a pre-programmed evasive mode and continued toward the final objective. The swarm split. 17 drones peeled off in 8 different directions. On radar, the single large track target suddenly fragmented into 17 scattered blips, leaving the S-400 unable to maintain a stable lock. At 6:41 a.m., the drones breached the final defensive perimeter of the factory. They entered the engagement zone of a Pantsir S-1 system, mounted on the roof of the main facility. 2 30mm automatic cannons roared to life, firing thousands of rounds per minute. The night sky was ripped apart by a wall of metal, traveling at terrifying speed. The drones plunged into the factory complex, a dense, maze-like structure of steel, concrete, and industrial infrastructure. They used chimneys over 50 meters tall as cover, weaving between massive concrete blocks. Operators weren't just dodging gunfire anymore, they were fighting dirty airflow and chaotic turbulence generated by the industrial structures. Every time a drone emerged from behind a smokestack, the Pantsir's radar instantly locked on. One drone was isolated. A 30mm round detonated directly in front of its nose. With no room to dodge left or right, the operator slammed the throttle to maximum, forcing the drone through a narrow gap in a large Beriev aviation billboard. The blast wave cracked the camera lens. The image shattered into a spiderweb of fractures, but the drone stayed airborne. And then, they saw it. The Pantsir S-1 has a built-in limitation. Its radar and guns cannot fire directly upward over the turret. Above it lies a conical blind zone, roughly 15 degrees wide. The operators reacted instantly. All drones boosted power and climbed vertically, flying straight into the blind zone. Suddenly, the guns went silent. The Pantsir had burned through nearly its entire ammunition supply in under 30 seconds. The barrels glowed red from overheating. The automatic reload system needed more than 10 seconds to cycle new ammunition. The sky went completely quiet. That was the golden moment. At 6:52 a.m., inside the hangar, fluorescent lights switched on. The Mi-28 Newton's attack helicopters were now fully visible. They sat motionless inside the hangar, dark camouflage paint reflecting the overhead lights, weapon pylons loaded, the distinctive nose sensor systems clearly outlined. No crews inside, no warning. Danger was closing in by the second. On the Russian side, panic began to spread. The Pantsir commander, realizing the guns were temporarily offline while the hangar doors were open, shouted orders over the radio. The command was immediately relayed to the electronic warfare unit parked in the courtyard. The R-330 Zhitel vehicle switched to maximum jamming mode. This wasn't a kinetic weapon. No fire, no explosions. It was pure electronic suppression, designed to cripple GPS, satellite links, and wireless control signals across tens of kilometers. Antennas rotated toward the factory and unleashed a dense electromagnetic field, flooding the most common control bands used by civilian and semi-military drones. On the Ukrainian side, the real nightmare began. On the operator's screens, video didn't just lag, it collapsed completely. Every display turned into a sea of white noise. GPS dropped out. Control telemetry all but vanished. And suddenly, the drones were flying blind. For the drone pilots, those 8 seconds were the longest of their lives. They were flying completely blind, inside crosswinds pushing nearly 40 kilometers per hour. No video, no navigation cues. The only thing keeping the drones in the air was muscle memory and instinct. One pilot fought the overwhelming urge to pull the nose up. He knew exactly how dangerous that instinct was. Without visual reference, the human sense of balance lies. One wrong correction and the drone would tumble out of control. His hands clenched the controls. Sweat burned into his eyes. Through subtle vibrations transmitted into his fingertips, he could feel the drone being pushed off course by the wind. Then, somewhere inside the static, a dry, hollow impact. Drone 7 had clipped a light pole and disintegrated on contact. But Russia was still fighting with yesterday's mindset. The R-330 Zhitel electronic warfare system was designed primarily to jam communication and navigation channels, operating on predictable frequencies. It works like shouting as loudly as possible over a fixed band, hoping to drown out the conversation. The Ukrainian drones didn't shout, they whispered. Onboard artificial intelligence detected the jamming instantly and activated frequency hopping mode. Instead of transmitting on a single channel, their transceivers began jumping continuously between 900 MHz, 4 GHz, and 5.8 GHz, switching dozens of times per second, following a pseudo-random pattern known only to the swarm. About 10 kilometers offshore, a fixed-wing drone acting as a mothership was circling at an altitude above 1,500 meters. It collected fragmented signals from the swarm, reconstructed them into coherent data, and relayed everything back to the pilots through a directional laser link. A laser channel that was almost completely immune to radio jamming. Russian electronic warfare systems didn't even detect it, let alone interfere with it. And then, suddenly, the interference vanished. Video feeds snapped back to life, clear, stable, high resolution. The pilots took deep breaths, as if exhaling after being submerged underwater. The hangar doors were now open about 2.5 meters, just enough to reveal the nose landing gear and forward fuselage of the first Mi-28 Newton's attack helicopter inside. Meanwhile, the Russian Zhetel vehicle continued blasting powerful jamming signals into empty air, completely unaware that the drones had already switched to a different communications layer. The path was open. At 7:15 a.m., 10 surviving drones charged straight through hangar door number 3. The moment they crossed inside, everything changed. The air inside the hangar wasn't calm. It was a violent mix of dust, debris, and turbulent backwash from industrial ventilation systems. The drones were tossed around like dry leaves in whitewater rapids. The pilots had to make microscopic corrections. A deviation of just a few millimeters could send a drone straight into concrete walls or steel framing. Inside the hangar, chaos erupted. Russian technicians and guards scattered in every direction. Now they could see the drones clearly. 10 Black Hornets, buzzing violently inside the enclosed metal space. One panicked soldier raised an Igla-S shoulder-fired missile launcher. He activated the laser designator, painting a green dot onto the lead drone. It was hopeless. The Igla-S has a minimum engagement range of roughly 500 meters. At a distance of only a few dozen meters, he might as well have been trying to shoot a hummingbird with a laser pointer. Other guards opened fire with AK-74 rifles. 5.45mm rounds ricocheted wildly off steel beams and concrete floors, turning the hangar into a lethal echo chamber of screaming metal. The drone pilots ignored the gunfire completely. They weren't targeting people, they were targeting chemistry. The lead drone didn't slam into the body of the Mi-28 Newtons. Instead, it made a sharp left turn, diving straight into a maintenance cart positioned beside the helicopter. Mounted on that cart were high-pressure industrial oxygen cylinders, used for welding repairs on airframes and weapon pylons. The drone struck at roughly 120 kilometers per hour. The warhead detonated instantly. The explosion didn't just rupture the steel tanks, it caused the compressed oxygen inside to vent violently in a fraction of a second. Oxygen met sparks in a confined space. What followed was an extreme, high-temperature flame jet, behaving like a cutting torch on an industrial scale. The temperature of that white-hot flame exceeded 3,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt aluminum and titanium alloys in seconds. Directly above the blast point was the left side of the Mi-28 Newtons' fuselage, where the aircraft's fuel tanks and fuel lines are housed. Under normal conditions, aviation fuel is surprisingly hard to ignite. But nothing remains stable when it's exposed to thousands of degrees of oxygen-fed heat. In less than a second, the protective metal skin liquefied. Fuel inside vaporized, and then ignited violently. This wasn't a small pop, it was a devastating concussion. A massive fireball expanded outward. The shockwave ripped through the hangar, throwing Russian guards off their feet. Flames spread instantly to the landing gear and wheel assemblies. Not ordinary tires, but heavy-load aircraft wheels, filled with specialized rubber compounds. When they burned, they released thick, toxic black smoke, blinding anyone still trapped inside and overwhelming the ventilation system. The temperature inside the hangar surged past 600 degrees Celsius. The heat was so intense that even the remaining drones began to experience battery instability as their cooling systems overloaded. But by then, it didn't matter. Drone 4 identified the next critical target. Beneath the weapon pylons of the Mi-28 Newtons, on a yellow maintenance cart, sat several guided anti-tank missiles awaiting installation. Some were training rounds, but they still contained solid rocket propellant. The drone plunged straight into the rack. Its warhead pierced the casing of the first missile, igniting the solid fuel instantly. Because the missiles were secured in place, unable to fly, all released energy remained localized, turning them into a stationary explosive mass. The white-hot flame was so intense it cracked and peeled the concrete floor beneath it. The helicopter's airframe began to fail. At just a few hundred degrees Celsius, aluminum and titanium alloys lose a massive portion of their structural strength. In this state, they were no stronger than red-hot metal. Amid the groan and twist of deforming steel, the main rotor assembly, designed to withstand enormous lift forces in flight, bent, then collapsed. A gearbox and driveshaft assembly weighing hundreds of kilograms slammed into the floor, crushing everything beneath it. Fuel lines tore open. The remaining fuel poured into an inferno already raging inside the hangar. What had once been a symbol of Russian air power was no longer an aircraft. It was molten scrap, dissolving inside a furnace worth billions. Hangar number 3 had become a catastrophe. But the mission wasn't over. In military aviation, there's a saying, if it isn't fully burned, it isn't truly destroyed. The remaining drones weren't there to observe. They were there to finish the job. The final strike package consisted of 6 FPV drones, lining up for the last dive. They accelerated to maximum speed. At nearly 130 kilometers per hour, they were no longer drones. They were flying shells. All 6 struck almost simultaneously, separated by fractions of a second. This wasn't a series of explosions. It was like 6 massive sledgehammers slamming into the helicopter's propulsion system. Each drone carried enormous kinetic energy. When their warheads detonated, molten metal fragments were hurled at extreme velocity, slicing through engine casings and gearboxes as if tearing paper. The rapid detonations turned the entire hangar into a giant pressure cooker. Internal pressure spiked far beyond what the roof structure could withstand. The result wasn't a collapse. The steel roof was blown completely off, ripped away like the lid of a tin can. A towering column of black smoke rose hundreds of meters into the early morning sky. It took firefighters 8 hours to bring the blaze under control. Inside, what had once been a helicopter maintenance and assembly facility was reduced to twisted steel, resembling modern art more than a military-industrial complex. Now, look at the cost. Because economics can be more ruthless than physics, Ukraine's total expenditure, including lost drones, relay platforms, and intelligence work, came to roughly $240,000. Russia's losses were far heavier. 2 Mi-28 Newtons attack helicopters were completely destroyed, with a combined estimated value of $32 to $36 million. You no longer need to outspend your opponent. You just need to understand how they operate and how to break it. And the final question remains. If you were Ivan, which door would you secure next? Bye for now.